What really happened with your host, Mike Rivero. You're listening to the Republic Broadcasting Network, where you'll find out what the Fukushima's going on.
And aloha, America. Welcome to our show today. It is Monday, July 31st, last day of the month here. We've got a lot of stuff to talk about today. The phone lines are open, 800-313-9443. Mike is in our control room, twiddling the dials, keeping us out of trouble, ready to answer the phone when you call on in. Obviously, the big news right now, Anthony Scaramucci is out as the White House Communications Director. And, of course, some of the people trying to be polite are saying that he resigned. But the reality is that the new White House Chief of Staff, Kelly, wanted him gone. And so Scaramucci's gone less than 2 weeks after he took the job to begin with. And so there's all of this dust up at the White House. And unfortunately, it is necessary. If you're going to clean the swamp, you clean the front porch first. But, of course, Trump's enemies are out there saying, see, it proves the White House is in chaos. He can't manage his own White House and blah, 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 blah. And, yeah, it does look bad. But on the other hand, as I said, one of Trump's biggest mistakes coming into the White House, he wanted to be magnanimous in victory. He kept all these Obama holdovers and he brought in Priebus trying to mend bridges with the GOP for 2020. And Trump just does not understand how Washington, D.C. power politics works. Just because somebody works for you and you sign their paycheck does not mean they are loyal to you and are not actually working against you. So we may see Kelly, there may be a few more ousters yet to come here. And, of course, it's still very much up in the air as to who's going to replace Scaramucci as Director of Communications. At one point, Sean Spicer was supposed to have that job. And when Scaramucci came on in, Spicer quit in a huff. So all kinds of stuff going on here. But it does set a precedent. Trump's in a firing mood. And I hope that carries over to Attorney General Jeff Sessions, who has had how many months now to move on those acknowledged Title 18 felony violations by Hillary Clinton and is still refusing to do so. Now let's get on over to Debbie Wasserman Schultz and these Pakistani IT scammers because this is erupting into what is probably going to be a bigger scandal even than Hillary's email server, although we don't know or we have not confirmed just how bad that scandal was. But even though Awan was arrested for bank fraud, there's a lot more going on here than just the bank fraud. And by the way, evidence is beginning to surface that much more fraud was going on, totaling potentially in the millions that was sent back to Pakistan and various other places as well. Now, Lieutenant Colonel Tony Schaefer, being interviewed by Laura Ingraham, who was filling in for Tucker Carlson last Thursday, said these Pakistani IT staffers were sending sensitive information to the Muslim Brotherhood. So there was an espionage ring operating inside the Capitol building, aided and abetted by Debbie Wasserman Schultz. And no wonder she's in a panic right now. There's a lot of stuff going on there. In fact, there's an article over in True News asking the question, could the Awan Schultz scandal actually bring down the Democratic Party? Because even after the Awan brothers were banned from the Capitol Internet, Debbie Wasserman Schultz was still funneling money to Imran. Everybody's wondering what was the reason for her to do that? Was he really a consultant? Did he help her disguise her voice electronically to make threatening calls to the lawyers handling that class action lawsuit? I saw one article today suggesting they were actually having an ongoing affair. Now, once again, Republicans of the House Judiciary Committee, they've drafted a letter to Attorney General Jeff Sessions and Deputy Attorney General Rod Rosenstein asking them to appoint a second special counsel to investigate the 2016 elections. This letter went out last Thursday. If Sessions refuses, Trump has grounds to fire him. Obstruction of justice, selective prosecution. It's not like Sessions is going to have to work at this. James Comey already came on out and said, Hillary committed these Title 18 felony violations. We're not choosing to prosecute. But that's not a ban on her ever being prosecuted. She's never had a trial. Double jeopardy does not apply. Now, Trey Gowdy voted to appoint a second special counsel to investigate James Comey, Loretta Lynch, Susan Rice, Hillary Clinton, and the Obama administration. And I remember when Trump first won the election, a lot of people were saying Trey Gowdy ought to be the Attorney General. And I think if Donald Trump does fire Sessions, I think we ought to start flooding the White House comment line. Put Trey Gowdy in there. He's not going to pull any punches. He's going to go where the evidence leads. Now, there is another article. We got to do a shout out to our on-air affiliates who are just now rejoining our network. And there's an article that came out of the Wall Street Journal, no less. All of a sudden, the Wall Street Journal is starting to actually pull back from the propaganda and get serious about some of these issues. And they have a story, Mueller is trumping Congress, and they're pointing out that Congress should have learned a lesson from the Lois Lerner scandal. But Capitol Hill continues its self-abasing deference to Special Prosecutor Robert Mueller, meaning that no, the things have not really changed at all. They're just hoping Mueller is going to find a way to get Trump out of there because that's what the group wants. And remember, Robert Mueller should have recused himself as a special prosecutor because of his close association with Hillary Clinton. And again, over at Blacklisted News, they're talking about how Mueller had a role in Hillary Clinton's arranging the Uranium One deal. In fact, he actually delivered a sample of the uranium to Russia so that they could assay it themselves and say, yes, this is something that we want to get involved with. Another good article coming out of the Wall Street Journal is who paid for the Trump dossier. And the Wall Street Journal is noticing that the Senate Judiciary Chairman Chuck Grassley was going to require Donald Trump Jr. and Paul Manafort to explain their meeting with Russian operators at Trump Tower last year. And the liberals and Hillaryites were all drooling at all of this. And then all of a sudden, the Democrats pulled back and said, it's okay with us if you want to have these men testify in private to the committee. And they're saying, why are they all of a sudden willing to let go this moment of political opportunity? Well, it's because at some point in there, they're going to ask the question, who paid for this Trump dossier? Because the owner of this Fusion PR company is going to be testifying. They're going to try and get the former British spy who actually wrote the thing to come on in. And they're going to say, who was signing the checks? And that is a piece of information the Democrats clearly are afraid of allowing to go public here. Now, over at the Washington Post, this was a little bit of a shock. Over the weekend, they had an op-ed basically admitting the quest to prove the collusion between Donald Trump and Russia is crumbling. There is no there, and the Washington Post is now admitting it. Meanwhile, Judge Napolitano is out there saying on Fox News, there's a mountain of evidence against Hillary Clinton. There really is huge amounts of evidence against her. And the Clinton Foundation, the Uranium One deal, helping an American company get around the Russian sanctions to buy a Russian company. Probably a lot more that we don't know. Apparently down in Arkansas, their state bar association has a different opinion. They're letting the Clintons skate on all the corruption and espionage and threats to national security. The good old boys at the Arkansas bar gave Hillary Clinton another pass, basically saying there does not appear to be a sufficient basis for a formal complaint. So the old Clinton political machine is still going strong down there in Arkansas. Now, True Pundit is reporting that it was John McCain who who was leaking President Trump's classified phone calls with world leaders shortly after Trump's inauguration. And White House officials said on Friday they believe the Justice Department could prosecute McCain, despite his recent brain tumor diagnosis. Of course, he may just say that's what made him do it, medical defense, temporary insanity, but he should be prosecuted at least. Justice is supposed to be blind. We know McCain was a major leak, and he should be prosecuted if evidence is found that White House officials believe is there. McCain should not get special consideration. Neither should have Hillary. Okay, the Government Accountability Institute has done another study tallying up the number of double votes in last year's election. And they're working with limited data because a lot of the states don't want to turn this information over. But this specifically looked at the issue of people who were registered to vote in 2 different states and voted in 2 different states. And they came up with something, 50,000 such votes for Hillary for the entire country. And, of course, Hillary's defenders are going to say, well, 50,000 is not really going to change anything. But that's on top of all the dead voters, the illegal immigrant voters, people who managed to have multiple registrations in the same state. But it is piling up, and it's making a prima facie case that, yes, Hillary Clinton tried to steal that election last year. She thought she had it locked. And when Trump and we, the American people, were able to overcome that election fraud, she just freaked out. She actually beat up John Podesta. And they cooked up this Russia stole the election for Donald Trump. Because Hillary can never admit that we, the people, don't like her, don't love her, or that she can somehow fail. Look at her most recent vanity book. She's in there blaming everybody, sexists, the Russians, Trump. She cannot look in a mirror and say, I messed up. And that, by the way, is a hallmark of being a sociopath. Now, somebody decided to have a little contest, if you will, at the DEF CON cybersecurity conference held in Las Vegas last week. And basically what they did is they went on out and they got 30 different pieces of electronic voting equipment used in American elections. Sequoia ABC Edge, ESNS iVotronic, AccuVote TSX, WinVote, and Diebold Express Poll 4,000 voting machines, including a bunch of others. They actually found some of these things on eBay. And they took a bunch of computer experts, and they assigned each one a machine, and they had a contest. Hack this U.S. voting machine. The longest it took to hack one of the machines was 90 minutes. That's how long it took to break into this machine and change the results of the election. Now remember, in the documentary Hacking Democracy, they showed at the very end how you could change the outcome of the election without even needing to touch the machine. But the reality is, for all this talk last year that we got from Barack Obama, it's impossible to rig the American elections. Yeah, it is. This contest proved it. These were people who work with computers during their daily lives. They're not even really, shall we say, expert hackers or cyber criminals. But they took part in this experiment, and most of them were able to get into these electronic machines in mere minutes. So, yeah, it's possible, and we know it's been going on. And I do wish that Trump's Election Integrity Commission would start really cranking up right now. And I understand they're meeting a tremendous amount of opposition from the states who do not want to turn over the voting data because clearly they have got something to hide. But it's not enough to go on out and confirm election fraud happened last year because we already know it did. We need a complete, total replacement of the election system. Our current system is designed to facilitate and conceal election fraud. We need to go the other direction. Something that is as difficult to rig as possible and get away with. Now, apparently a partner at a top Washington, D.C. law firm was vacationing in Turks and Caicos with his family, which is a well-known treasure hunting ground down there in the Caribbean. Michael Jones was injured when two gunmen broke into a rented beachfront property on Providenciales, which is the main island of the group, about 10 p.m. Friday, and just opened fire. And apparently these gunmen got past security. They tied up one of the guards with shoelaces. And they shot Jones. Then they fled. He was airlifted to Fort Lauderdale, Florida. He's in Memorial Regional Hospital in Hollywood. And he is a partner in the law firm Kirkland and Ellis. And it's at this point we start to wonder if there's something more to this than it just being a botched robbery. Because Kirkland and Ellis is a major Hillary Clinton donor. And they have a relationship with the Clintons going back decades, almost all the way back to Arkansas itself. So, all right, let's look at the war zones because, boy, the news there is bad. Just everybody seems to be itching for a fight. Of course, they're not going to fight it out themselves. They're going to send their surplus population out to be slaughtered here. Tiger forces have entered Deir ez-Zor province in Syria. They've liberated more villages on the west bank of the Euphrates River in Raqqa province and entered the northeastern part of Deir ez-Zor itself. Now, the USS Nimitz Carrier Strike Group starts their anti-Daesh air campaign in Syria and Iraq. And the U.S. Navy announced that. They're also going to be doing freedom of navigation, free flow of commerce and everything. Unfortunately, the airstrikes once again are hitting civilians in Raqqa. They're calling it Mosul 2. Those U.S. flights are hitting civilians and civilian infrastructure. Now, there was a reporter for RT Arabic, Khalid Aikatab, sorry if I botched it, and he got killed in a shelling by ISIS in Syria. And his last story that he did for Russia Today was how the Raqqa refugees are saying the coalition is bombing schools and hospitals. Here's another story. This is coming out of Journal Neo. Al-Qaeda mysteriously metastasizing in northwest Syria. All of a sudden in northwest Syria, there's a whole bunch more Al-Qaeda, and they've got brand new guns and all kinds of equipment and supplies. Where, oh, where are they coming from? So it looks like the U.S. has not given up on taking Syria over, even though it risks a direct military confrontation with Russia. Or maybe that's part of the plan. We know the ultimate goal of the deep staters is a full-on war with Russia and China to remove the threat of the ruble and the yuan from the U.S. dollar's global hegemonic domination. They're just looking for a way to get it started. We'll push them here in Syria. We're going to push them there in Ukraine. We're going to push them there in North Korea. Apparently, over 40 people have been killed in fighting over the southwest Yemen port of Mocha. The Yemen forces are still trying to find a way to break that blockade. Now, a little bit of good news. Apparently, the Yemeni army was able to shoot down one of the coalition planes over Saudi Arabian soil for the first time. They're starting to project power across that border. And that's got to be making Saudi Arabia very, very nervous. And apparently, coalition aircraft had destroyed the Yemen radar station, and Yemen got it working again, and nobody knew about it. So this airplane flew into the radar zone and wasn't able to get out soon enough. We'll be right back after these words from our sponsors. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. Looking around the corporate media, you'd think the firing of the White House communications director was the only thing going on in the world. They're obsessing about it. Everybody's out there, getting their 2 cents in. Huckabee Sanders, we all serve at the pleasure of the president. Yeah, that's true. That's absolutely true. And yet you have all these members of Congress who are out there screaming, don't you dare fire Robert Mueller. Don't you dare fire Sessions. There will be heck to pay. All right, getting on back to the war zones. Once again, the U.S. Navy fires warning shots at an Iranian patrol boat in the Persian Gulf. Now, the U.S. is claiming that they've got a right to go wherever they want. And, of course, the Iranians are saying, so do we. It's our waters. Each side is accusing the other of unprofessional behavior. But again, provoke, provoke, provoke. Try and get the other side to do something that can justify an attack. Analysis out of Sputnik News is saying that the situation in eastern Ukraine actually represents a form of hybrid aggression against Russia. And again, it's like they're pushing on the eastern Ukrainian republics to try and get Russia to come on in. Remember when that first started up and they were out there saying, oh, Russia's invaded, Russia's invaded. And they had the usual out of focus, blurry picture of objects on the ground. Oh, take it from us, those are Russian tanks. And by the way, I'm still very concerned about those old junked tanks that Ukraine bought. Scrap metal value, but they're the same model Russia is still using and could be painted and then bombed to frame Russia for an invasion of Ukraine. And I saw a very alarming story earlier today, which I did not post, saying that Russia has mobilized 3 motor rifle brigades for an invasion of Ukraine. And reading between the lines, getting past the obviously sensational headline, it turns out 2 of those motor rifle brigades are actually stationed there near the border. That's their home base. It's not like they've been mobilized. The third one is a little bit north, and they're on maneuvers. They're on war games, just like NATO is doing, matching tit for tat. And, of course, Mike Pence is over there in Europe, and he's running around, and he's out there screaming that Russian aggression is the greatest threat to the Baltic states. I'm sorry, whose military are currently parked on the Baltic states? It isn't Russia's. Meanwhile, the Georgian army has started a 2-week-long military exercise in partnership with the United States, including tanks and artillery provided by the U.S. And they started, again, just before Vice President Mike Pence visits the former Soviet nation. So everybody's out there banging their sabers as hard as they can here. U.S. tanks are heading for Tbilisi as NATO flexes their muscles in largest ever joint drills with Georgia. Doesn't look like Russia's being the aggressive one here. It's NATO. Trump apparently is getting ready to deploy Patriot missile systems to the European Union's border with Russia. They're just arming it all up. And again, I don't see Russian tanks and missiles on the northern side of our border with Canada. I don't see Russian tanks and missiles and soldiers on the southern side of our border with Mexico. I don't see Russian warships tooling around the Gulf of Mexico. It's very easy to see who is the aggressor here and how hard they're catapulting the propaganda forward that we're the good guys and they're the bad guys. Meanwhile, Pence is out there when he was going through Estonia, attacking Russia's unacceptable activities and North Korea's most recent missile test. Meanwhile, Russia's ramping up pressure on their side. They're expelling these American diplomats and intelligence operatives. I guess they knew who they were all along. And they've confiscated 2 American diplomatic facilities as well. Kind of match for what Obama did. We'll be back after these commercials. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. And as you know, Congress has passed the bill for new sanctions for Russia, Iran, and North Korea. It won on an overwhelming majority, potentially veto-proof. And so as of right now, it is likely that President Trump will go ahead and sign it. And this is causing all kinds of problems, not just in Russia, but all around the world. Berlin is openly calling for retaliation against what they are claiming are clearly illegal U.S. sanctions on Russia. And the German economic minister, Brigitte Zypries, told the Funk Mediengroup Group newspaper, "We consider this as being against international law, plain and simple. And of course, we don't want a trade war, but it is important the European Commission now looks into countermeasures." According to the minister, the Americans cannot punish German companies because they operate economically in another country. Now, ever since the U.S. got onto this idea of we're going to sanction you, we're going to sanction you, we're going to sanction you, it has caused a lot of ancillary harm, collateral damage if you prefer. And I think the U.S. got onto this idea of sanctioning, still thinking that most of the world's commerce still flowed through the U.S. dollar. And one of the reasons the sanctions aren't working all that well, and in some cases have backfired, is because much of the world has already broken free of the U.S. dollar. The president of Bolivia is calling the U.S. sanctions a threat to international law. And, of course, we know Bolivia is going to be targeted because they just got rid of their private central bank. So what is Russia going to do? I know the war hawks are hoping Russia will take a shot at us over the sanctions. But they didn't think this one all the way through. Because with Russia kicking out our diplomats, we're not going to be friends any longer. Just how the heck does NASA expect to get astronauts to and from the International Space Station? Did anybody stop to think about that? And let us not forget, the United States has forgotten how to make powerful rocket engines. They're still to this day, despite the earlier sanctions, buying rocket engines from Russia. What if Russia decides to stop selling them to us? There's even word that Russia is close to just dumping the dollar outright, not have any dollars in their foreign reserves accounts, just get rid of them. That's going to have a ripple effect. Now, two major U.S. news organizations citing the usual anonymous officials are claiming Russian hackers have broken into the computer networks of over a dozen U.S. power facilities, including nuclear plants. And, of course, this supports the anti-Russia hawks. But as anybody who studies how these things are put together understands, the computers that run the power station are not hooked to the outside internet. The entire case that this is the Russians is because the hacking code that's been discovered bears a similarity to a known suspected Russian hacking collective. But let us not forget, one of the things WikiLeaks released is the CIA actually has a dedicated hacking unit whose specialty is false flag hacking, breaking into a computer system and planting evidence to point the finger of blame someplace else. In light of this CIA capability, it is impossible to know who hacked your system, let alone have any assurance, oh, it had to be Russia. No. It's the anti-Russian propagandists who are doing it. Blame Russia for everything. All right. We're going to take a phone call. Mark in North Carolina. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, doing, Mike? Mike, I was just thinking, I asked you this before, but you honestly think these neocons and whoever else is thinking up this crap actually believes we could actually win a war with Russia, and rather than most likely result in the destruction of at least much of the planet, or is it that they just plan on their own bunkers and they figure they could survive it? I'm just wondering. The other thing is, I just saw on Fox News something before when I was at the gym that they had to, I saw it in the ticker, but evidently some neocon was saying Russia isn't what it used to be. It's not the, country it was in the Soviet Union, not economically or anything else. And this contradicts what these clowns used to say. They used to say the Soviet Union was so poor and so inefficient that they couldn't even feed their own people, and that their shelves were always empty. So, I mean, it goes on and on. But now I know right now that the supermarkets in Russia are not empty. I watch a lot of stuff on YouTube. They seem to be doing okay. I mean, their inflation is down now.
Yes.
They seem to have diversified their economy. But again, I just don't know. Are they this crazy that they think that we could win a war against Russia?
Well, I think
I don't even think we could win a conventional war.
I'm in agreement with you on that, and there's probably a lot of overlapping groupthink going on. The reality is that the neocons have been pushing for this plan of global domination through military means going back to the 1990s in a group called the Project for the New American Century. And their idea is, yes, they think that they can prevail by picking off small countries one by one and bringing them into the American empire, and that will give them the resources to go up against Russia and China. Unfortunately, all these little countries the U.S. has been picking on have all turned into quagmires, which are costing us more in terms of manpower, time, money, material. But they've gone too far to turn around. If you look back at history, every time the United States government gets itself into a huge economic mess, they get into a world war to try and sort it all out, or at least have something to blame it all on. Crash of 1907, World War I. Crash of 1929, World War II. Crash of 2008, and we're on the brink right now, if not already into World War III. And the idea is they're buoyed along by this idea that the United States has never lost a war, which is not entirely accurate. We certainly didn't win in Vietnam. We didn't win against North Korea. That's still technically an ongoing war. And contrary to the films and TV shows that you watch, the United States did not win World War I and World War II all by themselves. In fact, in both cases, the U.S. waited until they saw which way it was going to go, and they hopped in on the winning side.
Actually, talking about World War II, Russia was the main factor in defeating the Germans, not the United States, not Britain.
Absolutely.
The United States was the main factor defeating the Japanese, so that I'll say. But it just goes on, and they don't seem to understand what, the fact of the matter is it's a different time now. Now we're facing, it's no different than it was when we said we had the MAD system, mutual assured destruction.
Mm-hmm.
What do you think would happen? They got 7,000 nuclear weapons or more, Russia. So do we.
Yes.
How many of those things do you think you could blast out of the sky before enough got in to destroy your country? As a matter of fact, it'd probably be easier to destroy the United States than to destroy Russia, since they're larger land than we are.
Yeah, they are. They're a huge place here. And there's another factor. The U.S. conducted another successful THAAD test over the weekend. They launched an ICBM from here in Hawaii toward Alaska, and the THAAD shot it down. The problem is the test is not exactly honest. Because the ICBM is following a predictable ballistic path, and we know the latest generation of Russian and Chinese warheads are maneuverable. So they dipsy-doodle, they corkscrew, they weave back and forth, making an intercept that much more difficult. Now, the THAAD system is intended to intercept warheads when they're on their way in. That's why it's called the Terminal High-Altitude Area Defense System. Terminal being the third phase of a missile attack. The first is the boost phase, then there's the coast phase, then there's the terminal phase where it's coming in and hitting its target. And if it's spinning corkscrews in the skies, it's going to be hard to hit. One of the reasons Israel has not had any success with the Iron Dome against these rockets from Gaza is the rockets from Gaza are so poorly made, they don't fly straight. And because they're not flying straight, Iron Dome can't get a lock on them and blow them out of the air. The Israelis are using something like 10 Iron Dome rockets to get just one Gaza bottle rocket. And, of course, Israel doesn't have to worry about that because you, the taxpayers, are paying for those Iron Dome missiles. But again, U.S. military testing is set up to make the weapon look good, to make it look unbeatable. But we know how well the Patriots did in actual usage when they deployed them during the first Iraq War, and they deployed them to protect Israel, and they're saying it's a 90% success rate. Then when the war was over, they said, well, actually it was more like 50%. And then analysts looked at the actual data and said, no, actually it was down close to single digits. And again, all you need is one more warhead, then they have a defensive missile, and even if their defensive missiles work 100% correctly, there's still a warhead that's going to get on through.
Yeah, I wonder if Putin might not even do something bold and start putting warheads in places like Bolivia, Brazil, because Brazil is part of the BRICS, maybe even in Venezuela, because we're making noise now about going into Venezuela, and even Cuba again. I mean, you could say, well, all bets are off. The only thing that stopped World War III during the Cuban Missile Crisis, a lot of people don't realize this, is that Russians did agree to pull out those missiles, but under condition, and JFK agreed to this. Thank God he did, because he was a very level-headed and decent human being. He'd agreed to pull the missiles out of Turkey at the time. But I don't think Trump looks to me like he's irrational. He's erratic. I'm sorry. He looks to me like he's erratic. There's no telling what this guy might do. You know what I mean? He's I know he's got his own children and his grandchildren, as Kennedy did. Well, he had his own children at the time. He didn't have grandchildren. But I wonder whether he would start thinking about that, or just say, or just do something stupid. I know Putin's got kids and grandkids. So I don't think Trump's in control of the situation. I mean, we're looking at the chaos at the White House, and I think Trump is being totally absorbed with his fight against the swamp, and he is just. I mean, look at all the people being fired from the White House, and then realize the ones who are still keeping their jobs. All these neocon warmonger advisors, not one of them has been fired. All these generals he's putting in it. You see, one thing about JFK was not, didn't get all excited about generals and stuff. He himself had been in the Navy. He was a warrior, as a matter of fact. While at the same time, but Trump is in, he's fascinated. He's fascinated by these generals, and because he never was in the military himself, and I think it bothers him that he never was in the military. So now he's infatuated by these generals, and he puts one in after the other. Now this guy Kelly, I understand it was Kelly behind the firing of Scaramucci. So we shouldn't be having this. Kennedy knew how to handle these generals. That's one of the things. They wanted to start firing missiles in Cuba at that time during the Cuban Missile Crisis. Kennedy said no. It was the generals in the CIA that wanted Operation Northwoods to start false flags back then to make it look like Cuba. But thank God we have JFK at the time. Of course, this is why they killed him.
Yes.
But, at the same time, I mean, we haven't had a man like this since. We really haven't.
No.
This is our last true period. And God, we need a guy like that again, Mike. Or I'm afraid I'm afraid this whole world is going to go up in smoke, or nuclear. In nuclear smoke. You know what I mean?
Yes.
It just goes on and on. I just don't know how long we can last when we keep on doing this.
Jim.
I think of my kid. Think of my grandkids.
Jim Garrison, during his trial of Clay Shaw, made an observation, which he later wrote in his book about the conspiracy to kill JFK. And he said, what happened on November 22nd, 1963, was a coup d'etat. And it basically changed the direction of the nation. It's when the deep state really consolidated its power, and they've had a lock on the policies of the United States of America ever since. And Americans break down into two categories: those willing to go along with the deep state, like the Clintons and the Bushes, and those of us who are realizing that we are heading into a war that in all probability we're going to lose, even if it goes nuclear.
And Harry Truman, I'd say probably his biggest mistake was helping to create the CIA.
Harry Truman himself wrote that it was a difficult decision, and he recognized the danger that the CIA posed to a free, a democratic country.
So why do you do it then?
Well, he felt at the time, he felt at the time it was necessary because they needed intelligence on what these other countries were doing, and I mean there was a lot of very underhanded things going on at the close of World War II, when everybody was jockeying for just who was going to be in charge, especially of the money. That's what Bretton Woods was all about. But the U.S. and Britain were giving out captured German Enigma encryption machines to friendly governments, never telling them that they had the technology to be able to break and read those messages.
But, you know, he had the military. He had military. As a matter of fact, the OSS, they were under the military. Now, at least with the military, there's a chain of command, and they're under better control when you have intelligence under the military than when you have a bunch of political hacks like you have in the CIA that are all over the place and are bought and paid for by a lot of corporations. They have certain out-of-the-country loyalties, globalist loyalties.
Exactly. And, ties to the drug trade. And I find it amazing that we call it the Central Intelligence Agency when it is one of just 17 intelligence agencies operating inside the United States of America. If it was central, we would need only one. Thank you for the call, Mark. We're going to let you go here. We've got to take a break for commercials. Aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. And getting on back to that question, if we're supposed to have a Central Intelligence Agency, why do we have a total of 17 different intelligence agencies that are basically constantly in a faction fight with each other? There's got to be a huge amount of duplication of effort at taxpayer expense, and we know that because WikiLeaks has confirmed that the CIA was developing cyber tools in parallel with the NSA. Maybe the reason they've broken this all up into 17 different intelligence agencies is so the American people don't understand the vast total amount of money the government spends to spy on you. Now, getting on back to the war zones and this idea that our leaders seem to do things without really thinking them out. Central Command, CENTCOM, is expressing concern about this imposition of a long-term blockade on Qatar, mostly because of the U.S. Ability to carry out operations out of Al Udeid Air Base is limited, or could be even curtailed. And Al Udeid is the forward operating headquarters for Central Command. It hosts 10,000 U.S. troops, and it's basically the location from which the United States' constant wars across the Middle East are being conducted. Now, they're saying so far they haven't been impacted by the blockade, but they don't think the situation can be maintained. Sooner or later, the government of Qatar is going to work to cut them off and isolate them. Now, getting on over into Asia, as you know, a couple of days ago, President Trump tweeted out he was very disappointed in China following Pyongyang's latest missile test, saying we will no longer allow this to continue. And Beijing came on back saying this is making us angry and frustrated because it's not really our problem. We didn't create this mess. The United States and South Korea did 50 years ago. And we are not responsible for what's going on down there. And so the Twitterer-in-chief is continuing to lavish pressure on China. And now they're talking about, and you knew this was coming, sanctions on China. They're going to have sanctions on China now, because China won't do anything to stop North Korea. Now, with all these sanctions going on all these countries, the first thing that's going to happen is all these other countries are going to drop any business involving the U.S. dollar, and they are going to unite together against U.S. economic interests. And if this goes to a real shooting war, this is going to be the opposition. We're not just going to be fighting China and Russia. We're going to be fighting Iran and Iraq and North Korea and who knows who all else. that is just sick and tired of the U.S. government meddling in their affairs. Have to take a break for station identification. We'll be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. So it's hour number 2. The phone lines are open, 800-313-9443. So basically what's going on here is Donald Trump is getting ready to open a second front in the war of sanctions. This one against China. And they're already sanctioning North Korea. And all that this is going to do is push all of these sanctioned countries away from involvement with the U.S. economy. We have Europe basically taking Russia's side against the U.S. regarding the new sanctions over there. Now, China has had a huge military parade, and they really were showing off all their new toys. President Xi Jinping inspected his troops, and apparently in this parade they included stealth jets and nuclear missiles and thousands of elite troops. War with China will be costly. Let's take some phone calls. Wes in Idaho, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Thanks for taking my call, Michael. 43 U.S. senators want to make it a felony with a $1 million fine, 20 years in jail for boycotting Israel, boycotting anything that Israel makes. In France, I guess if you wear a T-shirt advocating a boycott of Israel, you get arrested and prosecuted. I don't see any report on what really happened about this. Also, it is House Joint Resolution 1697. The same thing. It's obvious who our senators and our Congress are really here to help. It's certainly not the people. I mean, we're supposed to have a First Amendment right of freedom of speech, and that includes a boycott, I would say.
Yeah, you're absolutely right here. And we did cover these when the votes went on through. It's actually been a little over a week now. But you're absolutely right. Both of these bills, supporting boycott, divestment sanctions, or just boycotting Israel in general, they're attacks on the First Amendment by Israel supporters in this country. And it needs to go to a Supreme Court challenge. And I would hope that the justices would say it is a freedom of speech issue. But we've already seen the precedent where the Second Amendment has been given certain exceptions. It's been whittled away. Our right to keep and bear arms is no longer absolute. We're required to register them. We're limited in terms of the kinds of weapons that we can acquire, and so forth and so on. And the Supreme Court justices may say, well, based on that precedent, we can put restrictions and limits on the right to freedom of speech. And it is a very scary prospect indeed. Now, as far as advocating for boycott, divestment, and sanctions, yeah, that's going to shut down. As far as boycotting is concerned, just don't buy the products. And when they say, why aren't you buying the products, just say the products are no good. And I've used the example of these Israeli-made batteries that we had in our alarm system when we lived out in Kaonohi. And they were supposed to last for 6 months, and they would fail after just 2 weeks and create this huge noise about the failure of the batteries. So I refuse to buy batteries made in Israel. Not because they're made in Israel, but because they're lousy batteries.
Physicist James McCanney says the lake at Yellowstone needs to be drained, otherwise a volcano would be explosive. Also, James McCanney says just no way that we can go to Mars. It's just impossible. Have you ever had him on as a guest? You know what I'm talking about?
No, I haven't. And obviously, the idea being able to drain Yellowstone, aside competing its value as a tourism venue, you're still not going to get rid of the water that's in the soil itself. And I understand his concern is that in the event of a Yellowstone eruption, that water will flash into steam and make the explosion that much more energetic. But that applies to the water that's within the soil, within the trees, and everything else. As far as going to Mars, yeah, I think it's viable. I mean, we've already unmanned hardware. I think it's only a matter of time before we have a manned mission. And I would hope that the technology developed to solve those problems is going to spawn new products and new industries to help bring manufacturing back here.
Have you ever had James McCanney on? You know what I'm talking about?
No, yeah, I know who you're talking about, and no, I have not, and I have no immediate plans to. All right, well, Wes, we're going to let you go here. Thank you for the phone call. We're going to do a shout-out to our on-air affiliates rejoining our network, and we're going to switch over to Terry in Oregon. Aloha, welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Oh, Mike, can you hear me?
I hear you just fine.
Okay, Mike, Wes had a good point about the BDS. And I want to thank you for not cutting Mark off too soon. There was an excellent dialogue between you and him about the neocons and all this war stuff going on. And that's why I'm calling. Are these neocons really that stupid? The same concern that Mark had, that they think they can survive a nuclear war. And what's the world going to out of the ground after 20 years or however long it is? Are they going to be able to function on an Earth that's been scorching? Are they really that stupid? Or is it all a bluff? It is a bluff. It may get out of hand, and they might start something they didn't intend on.
Well, that's the real danger there at the end. And again, they're caught up in their own group think that the U.S. Never loses. And yet the government has all these bunkers set up. They have, for the last 20 years, been building all these new underground bunkers. There's reportedly one under the new Denver airport, one under the northeast corner of Griffith Park in Los Angeles. We've got one bored into the middle of the Ko'olau Mountains here. And there's Mount Weather, which is where they've reactivated the Greenbrier. That's where Congress is supposed to go. I don't know what the plans are for the Supreme Court. But yeah, they've got all their bunkers set on up in case the worst case scenario happens. But they're really out there, you know, I think adrenaline of thinking about a new world war. And we know that people actually do get hooked on that excitement. A good example of that was Patton. After Germany surrendered, Patton wanted to just keep right on marching into Moscow.
Yeah, but how can they be so stupid? They got to go underground for 20 years, and nobody wants to do that.
I don't think they're thinking they're going to have to do that. They're probably reassured of the facilities there. What certainly wouldn't be 20 years. Most of the fission byproducts from a nuclear attack fade out after just a few months. I mean, look at Hiroshima and Nagasaki today, and how quickly they were reoccupied and rebuilt following that nuclear attack.
Okay. All right, well, I guess that's what they're thinking about. They probably also think that we got these iron domes like you were talking about with Israel.
Yes.
Around Washington, D.C. and these other places as well. And they might think that, hey, that's going to protect us too.
I'm sure they're absolutely convinced of that. They almost remind me of Wovoka, who was this Native American, began the ghost dance religion, who believed that painting your shirts with special symbols would stop the cavalry soldiers' bullets. Didn't actually work out, but that's what they believed.
Yeah, Mike, let me just switch gears to about Hillary and Trump. I was under the impression that Hillary won the popular vote and Trump won the Electoral College. Is that correct?
Well, that's certainly what Hillary's people have been putting on out, but so far there's been so much crooked voting uncovered, Hillary's popular vote margin has been erased.
Yeah, but Trump won because of the Electoral College, right?
Well, yes, that's the way the game is played right now.
Yeah, but you told me last week when I called that if we didn't have the Electoral College, that Trump would have still won, and that's why I'm so confused. Straighten me out, please.
Well, because of all the election fraud that has been uncovered, he won the popular vote. You have to discard all of those votes for Hillary Clinton that came from people who voted twice, people who were not legally entitled to vote, like the illegal immigrants. They apparently voted in the millions. All the dead people who were voting for her, they found people in the elections registry down in Florida whose age is over 100 years, and they have a deep suspicion these people don't actually exist anymore.
Okay, that's correct. Also, but your premise was you were against the Electoral College, and that's the only thing I had a question about. Everything else I pretty much agree with you with. Electoral College is what kind of saved us, in the Midwest and all these other places that, don't have this radical thought like they do on both coasts and the inner cities.
Well, again, I understand that a lot of people think that that's what the Electoral College is supposed to do until you realize that the states with higher populations get more electors, and the states with lower populations get fewer electors. Going on back and reading some of the earliest writings by the framers of the Constitution, the Electoral College was actually created as a safety device so that if necessary, a populist president who was dangerous to the country could be replaced at the last second. And there's been some skullduggery in history where electors were literally bribed to vote for the other guy, and there's at least one presidency where, and I forget which president it was, but he was trailing in the Electoral College vote, and then all of a sudden, miracle of miracles, the Electoral College voted, and he became the President of the United States.
Mm-hmm. Okay, Mike, I appreciate that. Thanks a lot. Keep up the good work, and we'll talk to you later.
All right, thank you very much here, and we're going to switch over to Jim in Missouri. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, Mike. How you doing?
Doing fine.
Hey, on this second special counsel deal, I'm telling you, the person we need in there is Dr. Edwin Vieira. He's an outsider.
Mm-hmm.
He's a constitutional attorney, and he has no fear. Anybody out there got any contact to the Trump administration? That's who Trump needs in that spot.
Okay, well, right now it's up to Jeff Sessions whether or not to appoint a special counsel, and so all eyes are on the Attorney General. And if Sessions says we don't need a special counsel to investigate Hillary, at that point Sessions needs to be fired.
Yep.
Trump's got to lay down the law on this stuff right now. And he's in a firing mood. He's been firing a lot of people lately, and he needs to fire Sessions. And he needs to bring in somebody like this gentleman you described to replace him. I would love to see Trey Gowdy as Attorney General, or Chuck Grassley, somebody who really wants to do the job and go after Hillary for all this espionage and corruption and pay for play and the rest of it. And I think Donald Trump is hopefully beginning to realize that the entire city inside the Beltway of Washington, D.C., they're all interconnected and they're all corrupted. And you're right, he does need to start bringing in people from outside who can do the job, but who do not have these compromising connections.
Absolutely. That's all I had for you, Mike.
All right, thanks an awful lot. We're going to switch over to Alex in Florida. Aloha, Alex. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Mike, was it a setup to even hire Kelly? I think Scaramucci seemed to be the right guy. I don't know what Trump's doing. He shouldn't let this general fire Scaramucci. I think he should fire Kelly right now.
Well, he just got rid of Priebus, and that was a good move because Priebus was openly trying to sabotage the Trump administration. Priebus was one of the big leakers inside the White House, and the only reason Priebus got the job as White House chief of staff was Trump was trying to mend fences with the GOP for 2020. But Priebus turned out to just be a snake in the midst, acting like a snake. And Priebus had to go, and he got Kelly to come on in, and I'm sure Kelly got some understandings with Trump saying that, Kelly gets to shape the White House staff because that is the job of the White House chief of staff, is to be in control of the White House staff so that the president is free to deal with policy issues. And so Kelly's doing his job, and Scaramucci is out, and it did ruffle a lot of feathers when Scaramucci came on in. I'd like him to see to bring back Sean Spicer. I thought he did a great job.
Yeah. So you think that Scaramucci wasn't the right guy for the job?
Well, obviously, Kelly thought he was the wrong guy for the job, and Kelly's basically doing what new CEOs tend to do when they come into an enterprise. They'll find one or two people to fire just to wake everybody else up that there's a new boss here, and you'd better toe the line.
Well, since you put it that way, maybe Trump hired Scaramucci just to make a point because he knew he was going to hire Kelly. Do you think that
could very well be? It could very well be. I mean, everybody's just amazed. Scaramucci was only there for 10 days. Now, the official story is that apparently Scaramucci went on this profanity-laced rant against the corporate media, and Trump felt that that was highly inappropriate.
Yeah. Now, on the special counsel deal, didn't they, isn't there a timeline, like 60 days to come up with a special counsel?
No, there's no time delay. It's basically the request has to be made. But if Sessions does not make any moves to appoint a special counsel, then at that point he should be fired. He's not doing his job. He's the former head of the FBI, laid out a laundry list of felony violations of Title 18 by Hillary Clinton, and the new Attorney General is refusing to move on that.
Oh, no doubt. I agree with you wholeheartedly on that. So, in other words, how much time do you think Trump's going to give him to appoint a special counsel? I mean, basically, there's nothing holding it up but him right now. Is that right?
Yeah, that's exactly right. Yeah, Sessions got the official request from the House Judiciary Committee Thursday, and he should be acting on it right now. Of course, we're hearing all this talk that Trump is going to fire Sessions anyway and replace him with a recess appointment not subject to congressional confirmation. And we keep hearing the name Rudy Giuliani coming up, which had also been on the list of potential attorneys general following the inauguration.
Yeah, Rudy Giuliani, I think he would do a great job with prosecuting Hillary Clinton, but I think he has some dirty hands too, like with 9/11. I think he has information.
Yeah, we know that he's dirty on that one as well. On the other hand, when he was a prosecutor, he was not shy about going after politicians. I mean, he gave Charlie Wilson a run for his money, regarding some of Charlie Wilson's reckless behavior. Charlie didn't face charges because it was out of jurisdiction. But, yeah, Giuliani was trying to make a name for himself, and this might be an opportunity for him to polish his image with the American people.
Yeah. I would take him back. I would take him in the position. I would take him right now over Sessions. Sessions is too little league. We need a big league player, someone that can hit the ball over the fence.
Sessions is obviously
twice or three times.
Sessions is compromised by the narcocracy. That's why he hasn't moved on Hillary, because when Hillary gets prosecuted, that whole stinking mess all the way back to Arkansas and the CIA's gun and drug running, it's all going to unzip open and everybody's going to get to see it hanging out there.
That's right. And I wanted to remind everyone that when, when Debbie Wasserman Schultz was let go from the DNC, that same day, the Clinton Foundation hired her. Remember that?
Yes.
So technically, I mean, she's probably not an employee there anymore, even though she probably is, but maybe not on paper. But I just can't believe where we're at. It's just, I don't know. It seems like we can't even take one step forward. What do you think? Do you think Trump may get rid of Sessions or what?
I think he should at this point. We've given Sessions, a comfortable amount of time to get into his new office, and he's not doing his job. He is not prosecuting Hillary Clinton for those felony Title 18 violations. And we don't need an explanation. We just need him out. Alex, we're going to let you go. Got to take a break for commercials.
Goodbye.
And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show. We're going to take a phone call from Tom in Florida. Aloha, Tom. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Yeah, good day, Michael. Michael, I want to ask you, should they rename Chicago Chirac? Chirac. I mean, what's going? I saw the news just now. They just had their over 402 murders, I believe it is. They had 27 shootings over the weekend in Chicago, Michael. But one thing I didn't look at, and they were talking about, a lot of these people that are getting shot in the arms or legs. It's like a gang initiation or something. So I'm wondering what's going on with that insanity over in Chicago and that Rahm Emanuel, that idiot. I mean, and then you got the Podesta idiot. I mean, it's unbelievable what these Democrats have done to these cities in the United States, Michael. It's unbelievable.
Yeah, it's very obvious. If you look at the worst-run cities, the most violent cities, they're all in the hands of the Democrats. The Democrats are controlling Hawaii, and we've got a huge homeless problem. We've got this light rail program that is way over budget, way behind schedule. Now apparently they're discovering there may have actually been embezzlement of some of the money involved. And it's amazing. The liberals keep pointing to Chicago as the model for gun laws for the rest of the country, because it's almost impossible for a law-abiding citizen in Chicago to own a gun, and that's why the criminals basically own the streets. And there's a huge amount of drugs pouring in there, a lot of refugees and illegal immigrants, a lot of turf wars going on. And ordinary law-abiding citizens, they're just standing there waiting to be turned into collateral damage.
You're right on, Michael. And listen, the United States is actually more dangerous than the Middle East in a lot of ways. I mean, in some ways it is more dangerous, but it's insanity that these people still keep voting these Democrats in there. It's amazing. And look at this, Michael.
We don't know that they are. Wait a minute. We don't know that they are. Okay, we're dealing with the revelation that there is a huge amount of election fraud going on. It's not confined to the presidential race. I keep hearing from people who live in Arizona saying they have no idea how John McCain keeps being reelected to the Senate because they don't know anybody who actually voted for him. And we know last year we were just stunned by this consent decree where the Republicans aren't allowed to look at Democratic election fraud without the Democrats' permission. Talk about a really screwed up court decision someplace in the past there. But it's time to look at this problem. Because it may,
Michael, you're right.
It may be that the vast majority of these people did not, in fact, really win their elections, and they hang on to power through massive election fraud. This is where we get the Maxine Waters and the Nancy Pelosi's and the Rahm Emanuels, who keep returning to office, even though it's obvious they're doing a terrible job.
Well, Michael, Maxine Waters lives in a $4.5 million home, and she's not even from the district. But that's another thing. But look what's going on in Venezuela, Michael. In South Florida here, there's hundreds of thousands of Venezuelans live here in Doral, and they're all against this Maduro. But this guy won the election last night in Venezuela. It's insanity what's going on. And this guy's a full-blown communist. He's another Castro. Let's not kid ourselves. Look at Castro brothers. They're criminal thug empire. I mean, what they've done to that beautiful island. It's just amazing to me. And one more thing, Michael. I know
Hold it. Before you move on, let's back up here a little bit and give me a chance to respond. Yes, Maduro is a socialist. So was Hugo Chavez. These are people who think the wealth of the nation ought to be spent on the people of the nation. And that, of course, is an idea that our bankers and politicians absolutely oppose. They want the wealth of the nation spent on themselves and their cronies. Most of what you think you know about Maduro, you're getting from the same people who insisted Saddam had nuclear weapons. So you have to step very carefully, about what you think you know about what's going on in Venezuela. And remember, last week the head of the CIA admitted this is a U.S.-backed regime change operation underway right now.
I agree with that. But I can tell you this, Maduro's come from the same cloth as Chavez, and their socialism is not going to work, Michael. Look at Cuba. All you got to do is look at the model of Cuba. Did that work out for the Cubans?
Wait a minute. The economic situation in Cuba has a lot more to do with this ongoing U.S. blockade than with anything else. And yes, Cuba's able to do business with Europe and Russia and Canada and Central America, but they're closest to the United States, and their economy used to be very tightly tied in with the United States. So, again, you need to be very careful about what you think you know about these socialist countries, because socialism is more demonized than Russia today. We got to let you go, Tom. We'll be right back after these few words. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. Now, getting on back to the war zones, China is putting troops along their border with North Korea in order to prevent an expected mass exodus of refugees in the event of a U.S. attack on North Korea. So this thing is getting very, very serious. Now, as you know, over the weekend, North Korea had a second successful test of the Hwasong-14 missile, and everybody's in a panic because this one can actually reach a significant part of the United States. The flight lasted 47 minutes. It covered a distance of 998 kilometers and reached an apogee of 3,725 kilometers, basically 7 times higher than the International Space Station. And Kim Jong-un has said this is meant to be a stern warning to the United States. So the United States is out there screaming bloody murder about this. Nikki Haley's saying we don't need an emergency session of the UN Security Council. The time for talk is over. Which is telegraphing, oh goody, we get to have an attack. We get to attack North Korea. And they're already talking tough out there. Story out of Indy 100. U.S. General says military has rapid, lethal, and overwhelming force ready for use against North Korea. South Korea is apparently talking about a strategic strike against command and control facilities, the nuclear test sites, and so forth. But here's the problem. We need to keep this in mind. Kim Jong-un knows what's going on, and by now I would say that any usable nuclear weapons they have developed, and it may not be very many, but they have been relocated and dispersed. Anybody going on in there with a strategic decapitation strike against the weapons can't promise they'll get them all, at which point North Korea's got nothing to lose by retaliation. Now, Donald Trump is out there. The tweeter-in-chief is out there once again saying it's previous administrations are at fault for the North Korea issue. And he's right about that. Bush was pushing on them. Obama was pushing on them. But he's out there saying, we'll handle North Korea. So the U.S. is ready to move additional THAAD systems to South Korea as quickly as possible. They're just setting up these rocket interceptors all over the place. Now, not everybody is on board with all of this. Russia is rejecting U.S. criticism over North Korea's ICBM test. Meanwhile, once again, to show their ire, U.S. flew 2 of their supersonic bombers over South Korea as a show of force in response for the missile test. Now, we are hearing from the Defense Ministry that North Korea is likely to conduct a 6th nuclear test, more powerful than anything they've built before, and it will be in combination with yet another missile test, this one from a submarine. So they're really starting to push on this whole situation. And Kim Jong-un, I don't think he really understands what the U.S. game plan is to get a war going in North Korea, or he is politically trapped by all of his supporters and backers who are out there saying you can't lose any face. You have to stand up to the U.S. And as a matter of fact, in that part of the world, Kim Jong-un's reputation has been improved by his standing up to the American imperialists. Surprisingly, Jill Stein, the Green Party candidate from last year, the one who was out there calling for the recount, she was on MSNBC, and she came on up and said this demonization of North Korea is just the run-up to another regime change. And host Alex Witt was saying it's the North Koreans who have added the provocation. And Stein said, remember where that came from. Long before they began their missile tests, the U.S. was conducting nuclear bombing runs over North Korea. We actually had nuclear weapons until the end of the Cold War stationed in South Korea. Jill Stein is saying the actions taken by North Korea are a defensive reaction to fears of U.S. aggression. And I hate to say it, but I'm absolutely in agreement with her. There are a lot of people, maybe Jill Stein's one of them, there are a lot of people who see that this isn't just an academic exercise anymore. It isn't just political rhetoric. We're actually hovering at the edge of a real war where millions are going to die. Now, there's another point of view out there, and Russia's deputy foreign minister, Sergei Ryabkov, is saying there is no nuclear threat from North Korea. It's being exaggerated. Yes, they're testing nuclear weapons underground, but that's a long way away from being able to miniaturize one to the point where it can be carried on their rockets. And if you look at the development of nuclear weapons by the United States, which began with Fat Man and Little Boy, those had to be deployed by aircraft, and it was a very long time before they could get the nuclear warheads small enough to be carried on ballistic missiles or cruise missiles. And Russia's deputy foreign minister is saying they're years away from a deliverable nuclear weapon. All right, we're going to take a phone call. Rick in Arizona, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Yeah, okay, real quick on that last comment. That's what I've been saying for a long time. North Korea doesn't have this kind of ability. As far as Castro goes, it's really amazing how the media can blind common sense. To me, Castro was put in there by the CIA to run out the Meyer Lansky mafia money laundering crowd 90 miles off the coast of Florida. They could not, the IRS could not have Lansky in operation.
CIA was on the other side.
You don't think so?
The CIA was on the side of Batista.
That's what they tell the American people, Mike.
Well, I don't care. I don't care what they're telling the American people. The CIA was on the side of Batista. They'd helped Batista steal the election in Cuba, first of all, so that the CIA could have Cuba as the center of intelligence operations for the Caribbean and Central America. Second, to guarantee sugar to the Pepsi-Cola company at below market rates, agricultural produce to United Fruit at below market rates, and they were big supporters of Richard Nixon. And no, absolutely, the CIA was on the other side. Who was it who led the invasion at the Bay of Pigs to try to get Castro out?
Look at Mike. Okay, we'll give you all that, Mike, but let me tell you what happens. If you have a blockade against Cuba because Castro is the bad guy, the tobacco farmers don't got to worry about being run out of business, or the sugar farmers. This was a very clandestine operation to make the American people think that Castro was a communist and we have to stop trade with him because otherwise it'll piss off all the farmers in America. I'm telling you, we could have smashed Castro with the UNLV football team. So for him to sit there for 75 years, there's more of a reason behind the curtain why he was there, in my opinion.
Yeah, because hang on, because following the Bay of Pigs and the Cuban Missile Crisis, the deal Kennedy made with Khrushchev was the United States would not interfere in Cuba anymore, because Khrushchev said, the next time you go on into Cuba, it will be a nuclear war. That's why the U.S. left Cuba alone all this time. And you're probably absolutely right about locking away Cuba's sugar and tobacco as a protectionist measure for American companies. But again, the CIA thought that Castro was going to be a pushover at the Bay of Pigs, and he wasn't. He had the Cuban people very much on his side.
We spent 10 years shipping equipment over to Vietnam to bomb up 5 feet tall people. I'm just saying that they couldn't have Lansky and his crowd survive in Cuba because it would just turn into a money laundering operation, a sovereign country, right off the coast of Florida, counterfeiting, hiding money, tax, all sorts of income tax shelters. I'm saying is what happened with Castro is not what was really going on, and that's all I have for today. Thank you.
All right, Rick. Well, we're going to let you go. And again, the idea that the CIA was behind Castro doesn't match with Operation Mongoose, which was the CIA was going to do a second invasion of Cuba, even at the risk of a nuclear war, and Kennedy had to shut that down. And that was one of the things that angered the CIA into taking part in Kennedy's assassination. Most people don't know this because it's not taught in the history books, but following Batista's bug out and Castro's taking over Cuba, he made diplomatic overtures to the United States government and said, I want to be friends. I want to engage in trade. And the U.S. came on back and said, well, are you willing to continue the selling of Cuba's agricultural produce at below market rates? And Castro said, no, that's what's impoverishing the Cuban people. You know, if you want to buy our sugar and our bananas and everything, you're going to have to pay the fair market rates. And that made him an enemy of these large American corporations that were used to getting these special deals from regime-changed countries around the world. And yes, Castro did kick out organized crime from Cuba because he saw how it was having this bad effect on the overall country. And so, yes, they kicked all the mafia out of there. The mafia wanted to turn Havana into another Las Vegas that was going to be a little bit easier to reach by people, especially in the southeast of the United States. This being before jet travel, where taking a propeller plane could still take 1 or 2 days for people on the East Coast to get to Las Vegas. So they wanted a tropical Las Vegas, and they built these huge casinos, and it was a wide open city. They had the donkey shows and all the rest of it. But the U.S. basically told Castro, no, we are not going to be your friends unless you continue all these special deals. And at that point, Castro was forced to turn to the Soviet Union and make friends with them, so he had a trading partner somewhere. It was a huge foreign policy blunder on the part of the U.S. government. Now then, getting on over to Pakistan, as you know, Prime Minister Nawaz Sharif has been kicked out in a soft coup orchestrated by the country's military using the judiciary, who basically disqualified Sharif from holding office due to corruption. At that point, he stepped down. But at the moment, the military generals are running that country, and there are concerns that they are going to escalate the conflict in the Kashmir between Pakistan and India. Meanwhile, there's still the ongoing confrontation between India and China up in the mountains, but now we're starting to see a confrontation growing in the ocean as China reasserts its territorial waters claim in waters that abut the Indian Ocean. It's a very scary time right now, I have to tell you. The future of planet Earth and the future of the human race is in the hands of whichever world leader is the least mentally stable, and frankly, almost all of them would look better in a straitjacket. Now, getting on over to Israel and Palestine, that situation is still not settling down. There was a mass rally in Istanbul over Israel's Jerusalem measures. Thousands of supporters of a conservative Turkish party rallied in Istanbul yesterday to protest measures taken by Israel in Jerusalem and show solidarity with the Palestinians. Now, over in Iran, the Ayatollah Khamenei is calling on Hajj pilgrims to take a stand on what's going on at Al-Aqsa, recalling that Israel does not actually have any legal authority over the Temple Mount. It's in the Palestinian section of the city. It is under the authority of a religious committee that makes all decisions. Israel doesn't have a right to go on in there and install metal detectors. And more alarmingly, of course, we're getting all these Israelis who are saying it's time to just blow up the Al-Aqsa Mosque and start building our third temple. Meanwhile, former Israeli Prime Minister Ehud Barak said that Netanyahu has kicked up this fuss at the Al-Aqsa Mosque to distract the public from the investigations into the corruption allegations against him. And yeah, that's what leaders will do. When Monica Lewinsky was walking out of the Congress after testifying about the blue dress and Bill Clinton, she was greeted with empty stares. Because while she'd been testifying, Bill Clinton launched cruise missile attacks into other countries claiming to hit terrorist biological weapons laboratories. Actually, what they bombed was an aspirin factory. The owners sued the United States successfully to rebuild the factory. So you got to pay for those $1 million a pop cruise missiles, and you got to pay to build a new aspirin factory. Such a deal already here. Now, getting on to Venezuela, the opposition is threatening war in the streets. Maduro apparently got what he wanted in the Venezuela Assembly vote. Now, he himself was not running for office, but basically the vote was to create a new constituent assembly that would be a new layer of the government, which would make the government actually a lot stronger because it's no longer just Maduro. But, of course, the U.S. is out there saying it's a sham. Nikki Haley is already saying that the U.S. government refuses to recognize the results of the election, like it was really any of their business anyway. But it is getting violent down there. There was an explosion in Caracas. They got it on video, injuring police. Apparently, a youth opposition leader was killed during the rioting over the election, and one of the candidates in the election was assassinated in their own home. A group of assailants entered his home, fired several shots. So a lot of wet work going on there. Nikki Haley is out there saying that the Venezuelan election is a step toward dictatorship. They're ladling it on. But remember, last week the head of the CIA admitted this is a U.S.-backed regime change operation. They've been trying to get their grubby little paws on Venezuela all the way back to the days of Hugo Chavez, and it looks like they're finally going to succeed. Peru is also refusing to recognize the results of the election. So they're all piling on down there as well. Now, do you remember those two CIA psychologists who helped design the CIA's torture program that you were never supposed to know about? And we all know Abu Ghraib and all these other places. They're basically on trial for crimes against humanity, war crimes. They're actually resorting to the defenses offered by accused Nazi war criminals at Nuremberg to say why they should not be held liable for the torture. We were only doing what we were hired to do. Boy, when you got to resort to the Nazi excuses, you've hit a new low. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. Now, after all the Sturm und Drang, it looks like Tony Blair will not face trial over lying the people of Great Britain into war against Iraq. And apparently a lawsuit was brought by General Abdul Wahed Shanan al-Rabat, former chief of staff of the Iraq Army, who wanted to prosecute Tony Blair and two other key ministers at the time over the fact that the entire war was based on a lie. And today a court ruled, well, there's no prospect of the case succeeding, which is politics speak for we're never going to rule in your favor anyway, so why bother? Along with China, Russia is starting to show off some of what is on the horizon for their weapons. And apparently Russia's sixth-generation fighter will carry lasers to knock out air-to-ground or air-to-air missiles. And apparently the design of the system identifies the seeker head on the missile and burns it out with the laser, blinding the missile so it can't find what it's looking for. Obviously, this is for missiles that track on infrared. For anti-radar, I'm sure they've got some other surprises. Just ask the crew of the USS Donald Cook. All right, let's talk about the economic news here. Today, the Minnesota residents getting their first glimpse of this year's health insurance rates. A lot of speculation. They're going to be getting the envelopes now. And they're trying to finalize all these premiums for 2018. And there's also dealing with the issue about whether any more companies are going to drop out of the individual marketplace as Blue Cross Blue Shield did last year. Now, last Friday we put up this video of John McCain just excoriating the Democrats over how bad Obamacare was, and yet when it came up for a repeal in Congress, it lost by one vote. John McCain. And following that, McCain got savaged on Twitter. And the American people are furious with McCain, which once again raises the question, how does he keep winning that Senate seat over and over? is he, along with so many others, the beneficiary of our rigged election system? Now, here's an article coming out of Zero Hedge. The Amazon effect, retail bankruptcies surge 110% in the first half of the year. Now, Amazon makes for a convenient scapegoat, and yes, they're doing very well, but the problem is in large part the simple fact people do not have money to spend these days, and they refuse to borrow more. We'll be right back after station identification. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show, hour number 3. The phone lines are open, 800-313-9443. We're talking about the economic news here. And over in Great Britain, people are going to the stores, and they're using their credit cards, and apparently Britain's consumer debt shot up by £1.5 billion in just 1 month, which is causing concern about skyrocketing debt and whether people can actually pay for it or not. And they're trying to do the same thing here. I mean, every day I go out and I get the mail, and there'll be 1, 2, sometimes 3 offers. You're already approved for this credit card, and it goes right into the shredder. I don't want to borrow any money. I don't want a loan. Like most Americans, I just want a decent paying job. I want to pay cash as I go through life. I don't want to be constantly in debt. I don't want the bankers making huge fortunes off of my personal transactions. If you're a homeowner, what you ought to do one day is take a look at your mortgage payments, total them all up over the life of the loan, 30 years, whatever, and then subtract the original asking price of the house. And what you've got left over is how much the banks made by typing a number into your account when your mortgage was approved. When you look at homes today, with all this constant interest on construction loans, credit lines, mortgages, all the rest of it, the banks make more money off a new home than the people who actually build it. What do the banks do to earn all that money? They type numbers into accounts out of thin air. It is a huge, gigantic scam. Most people have trouble getting their heads around it. Now, over in the European Union, they are very concerned about failing banks and bank runs. They have not been able to achieve the cashless society. So the EU is now looking at simply having a mechanism that would freeze all bank accounts. The banks start failing. There's a danger of a run on the bank. They throw a switch. The accounts are frozen. You go to the bank, pound on it, say, give me my money in my savings account. We can't. The government froze it. They're all frozen. Because we have to protect the banks. Because banks are so much more important than human beings. Now, up in Canada, former and current employees of Sears have filed a legal motion to stop dozens of Sears executives from splitting about $7.5 million in retention bonuses, while many of the laid-off workers missed out on severance payments. As you know, Sears is shutting down their operations in Canada completely, and all those workers are being let go, and they're being let go without severance, and the executives are just lining their pockets. And those executives bear the responsibility for Sears being in trouble. But the workers get punished for it. Now, here's a very bizarre story. This came out of Forbes. This columnist over at Forbes magazine has come on out saying that people living off the grid, the self-reliant homesteaders, are delusional. And they just want to mooch off civil society. Well, I'm sorry, people living off the grid, homesteaders, they're not mooching off civil society. What's going on here is Forbes is complaining because people who are living off the grid, they're not part of the tax slaves. They've broken free from being tax slaves, and we can't allow that. If that money is not coming in, that's a loss right there. They're stealing money from us by refusing to be a tax slave. All right, let's take a phone call. Al in Canada, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind? Al in Canada, are you there? I do not hear you. Going once, going twice. All right, we're going to go back to the news, and maybe Al will come on back here. Story coming out of counterpunch.org. Going soft on corporate crime, a bipartisan affair. And they're talking about both parties blame each other over the loosening of restrictions. And apparently Donald Trump is on board with ending the Foreign Corrupt Practices Act, which is the law that says it's illegal for any person, corporate or human, to bribe overseas to speed business along. And Trump has said that the law puts us at a huge disadvantage, and in this case he's actually right. Because in many countries, especially in Asia, it's sort of an accepted practice. When you're doing business, there will be gifts given or bribes offered to speed things along. It's an accepted part of the dance between businesses. And it's kind of hard to say we have to tolerate this kind of bribery. And if the rest of the world goes along with a ban, that would be a good thing. But in this case, to make the U.S. more competitive, yeah, I think it's the optimum, if not best, solution. We're going to do a shout-out now to our on-air affiliates, and I understand we have Al in Canada on the line. Al, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Aloha, Mike. I hope you're well.
I'm doing fine.
Great, you can hear me. I sent you an email concerning the health care premiums, the Obamacare premiums, pardon me. And lo and behold, look who's first in that list of skyrocketing premiums. This guy, John McCain, besides being, a war hawk and, other things, he's obviously been bought and paid for.
Yes.
There's no doubt about it. I mean, just looking at that, it's ridiculous. That is absolutely ridiculous. Who can afford those kinds of things?
I'm looking at the chart.
Is that crazy?
I'm looking at the chart right now. Arizona is looking at close to a 70% premium increase for Obamacare. And yet McCain voted against the repeal. I want to know how much stocks he has in health insurance corporations in his personal portfolio.
Is there a way to find that out?
I don't know. I don't think so. Political spending has to be a public record, but his personal investment portfolio, I don't think there's a way to get that absent an actual legal motion.
That's a shame because, these politicians, they get into politics and all of a sudden they're millionaires.
Yeah, funny how that works on out here. Let's see. Hawaii is close to 40% jump. Rhode Island's the least. They're down there at like 4%. But Arizona, almost 70% increase in a single year.
Yep.
If McCain gets reelected, I'm not going to believe it was an honest election. It can't be. Just grinding.
The guy's 80, isn't he?
Well, actually, with that brain tumor, he may not be around much longer anyway. But I'm looking at these. This is money gouging. This is absolutely money gouging. Yeah, I'm gonna link this to the front page of whatreallyhappened.com. This is obscene profit taking.
Oh yes, and you tie that in with that one chart I sent you about all the administrators standing on the backs of the doctors.
Yes,
just ridiculous.
It is.
No wonder healthcare in the United States is such a big business. It's scandalous. It really is. I'm at the point now in my life where I think exactly the kind of things you think. Water, fresh, drinkable, clean water should be a human right.
Yes.
Healthcare should be a human right. If you have a right to your own life, you have a right to take care of that life.
Any way you choose to. Any way you choose to. But unfortunately, our government is now out there. If you don't want to buy the products the medical industrial complex is selling, they're getting ready to order you to do that. You're not allowed to collect fresh water on your own land anymore. You have to buy it through a pipe or a bottle. You will buy and use these vaccines, even if they're ineffective or harmful. And it really is just grinding the last few pennies out of the pockets of the American people. And then they scratch their head and appear puzzled as to why the economy is locking up.
And you tie that into the inflation-hiding CPI. That is the icing on the cake. It is an absolute joke.
Yes, it is.
That rigged, indicator that they use is just, it's absolutely ridiculous. Mike, I love your show. I love talking to you. Good work. Thank you very much for having me.
All right, thank you very much as well, and we're going to let you go here. Yeah, it is it is just amazing. I mean, people are already on the verge of not being able to make it, and I mean, here in Hawaii, again, almost a 40% increase in premiums for health insurance in just 1 year. It's ridiculous. What a scam Obamacare was. And apparently too many people are profiting from it, and that's why Congress won't do a thing about it. John McCain just turned his back on his own state's constituents by voting down the repeal. All right, getting on over to Europe. Apparently, poverty across the European Union has reached new levels while the Brussels elite continue to preach about unity and success. Apparently, more than a quarter of the children in the 28-member state club are living below the breadline, with the total number of poor predicted to reach 100 million by 2020. And the worst affected nations are in that Eastern Bloc. No wonder they want billions from Great Britain to leave. They're not going to be able to make it without them. So, yes, let's add more layers of government and more layers of complexity and more layers of banking on top of everything. Apparently, British ministers have decided that the free movement between Great Britain and the EU will end in March of 2019. From that point on, you will have to go through a passport or visa process like the good old days. Another article, this one coming out of Sputnik News. Nations substitution, witnessing the biological extinction of the Europeans. And basically saying that in European countries, namely Italy, Germany, France, and Great Britain, they're going through a substitution of nations where the national ethnic majority is physically disappearing and is being replaced by these migrants. And that, of course, was the whole point by the globalists. To destroy any sense of regional cultural identity, historical identity, and just to show you how ridiculous this is going. Article that came on out from Investment Watch blog. Planned Parenthood is issuing new guidelines for talking to preschoolers about gender roles, sexuality, masturbation, transgenderism, and ways of determining if your child is trans or not. And they're literally talking about exposing children of 3 and 4 years old to graphic depictions of sex and these other issues. And Planned Parenthood is getting a huge amount of taxpayer money to do this. And these new guidelines for the transgender preschooler, let them wear what they want, have the haircut they want, and if they want to use a name that's of the other gender, just go along with it. They're going to raise the next generation to be so completely confused about who they are, they won't even know what bathroom to use. And that, of course, is a big part of the globalist agenda. Because people with a strong sense of self, a strong sense of identity, are much harder to control than human beings that their head is just mush and they have no idea where they belong in the world, and they're just waiting for somebody to say, oh, you belong over there at that drill press, punching out triggers for bombs. Now, Trump's wall is a go. The House has approved a $1.6 billion down payment for the border wall. I still think putting crocodiles in the Rio Grande would have been a lot cheaper. And we know that Trump was making a little bit of deal making to get this money from the House of Representatives. Now, do you remember that story that came out of Baltimore where an officer's body camera caught him planting drug evidence? And what happened was this officer went down this alley outside the home, planted the evidence, then walked back out front and turned on his body camera, and then had the camera running while he wandered back down this same alley and accidentally discovered the drugs. What the officer didn't realize is when you turn that camera on, the 30 seconds from before you turn it on is saved along with the video. And the video revealed he was planting drugs. They're reviewing all the other cases that this officer's been involved with, and so far the Baltimore prosecutor has thrown 34 cases out over planting evidence. 12 of the cases, the defendants are already serving time for the convictions. There's going to be a heck of a lawsuit there to clean up. No problem. The taxpayers will pay for it. It just feels like the nation is crumbling. We've lost our moral compass. They're trying to take our identity away from us. The police have become a blight on us rather than a service. And the government appears to have decided we, the American people, are an enemy because we won't do what we're told to do without question. Okay, now, story that came out of governmentslaves.info. The United States has higher vaccination rates than any other country. We also have a very high infant mortality rate. American children are experiencing epidemic levels of chronic disease, including autism, attention deficit disorder, learning disabilities, autoimmune disorders, asthma, epilepsy, and allergies. So if vaccinations are so effective in improving the health of children, why do the statistics point the other way? Surveying other countries' vaccination rates and child illness and mortality rates, we're seeing an inverse relationship. The more vaccinated the child, the sicker they are. The less vaccinated they are, the healthier they are. The data is incontrovertible. Vaccines are not helping our children. They're making a lot of money, but they're not helping our children. We have a medical industrial complex which, enabled by the U.S. government, is out there selling dangerous chemicals to make money. Now, apparently, there's a leading pathologist is calling for the prescription painkiller tramadol to be declared a Class A drug following a mother of 6 who died from an overdose. As it turns out, tramadol is as addictive as heroin. And apparently this woman was struggling to break her addiction with the pills. And this pathologist is saying people seem to assume tramadol is safe because it's prescribed by a doctor. But no, it's just as dangerous as heroin. But it makes money. It makes oodles of money. Another article out here, many Americans are on so many prescription medications, legal drugs they're allowed to have and buy, they're actually too fogged out to work effectively. They'll take all their pills in the morning, they go to their place of employment, and they're walking around in a drug-induced daze. And I want to ask you a question, and I made up a graphic about this, and I put it on the front page of whatreallyhappened.com, and you're allowed to copy it off and use it as you see fit. When was the last time you saw a TV commercial for a law firm that offered to sue on behalf of people who were made sick by eating healthy food and taking natural supplements? You've never seen one of those, have you? Because there aren't any. It's always for people who were made ill by prescription medications, who suffered permanent harm from prescription medications. It's not about healing. It's not about health. It's just another racket to take money away from people. And no, in point of fact, just because a doctor prescribes something to you doesn't mean it's safe. Remember those CEOs of a pharmaceutical corporation actually got into legal trouble. They were offering doctors incentives to get people hooked on prescription opioids. They're on the same moral level as those street dealers out there underneath the lamppost at night. We'll be right back after these few words. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. Interesting article just crossed my desk from the Daily Caller. Apparently, Debbie Wasserman Schultz is literally running away from anybody from the corporate media or any media at all. Apparently, her spokesman issued a statement saying she is not going to answer any questions about Iwan or their relationship or what he was doing. So she's basically ducking the press right now, which is like a flashing neon sign on her forehead saying, guilty, 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 guilty. So let's get into the science news here a little bit. A lot of rocking and rolling going on over there in Iceland, and their largest volcano, Katla, has been moved to yellow status. And then above that, there's orange and red. So it's a long way away from saying there's going to be an eruption. But observers are keeping an eye because there have been over 500 earthquakes in Iceland in the last 4 days. And experts are saying if Katla lets go, and it is Iceland's largest volcano, the eruption could be quite large and could cause a lot of disruption of air traffic. And apparently, near the edge of the volcano at the Mulaksvísl River, they're smelling a lot of sulfur coming from the ground. And that is generally an indicator of something about to blow there. It'll probably be very spectacular. Of course, it's rough to be on an island with those kind of explosive, toxic volcanoes and not really be able to go anywhere. Here in Hawaii, we're actually very lucky. Down on the Big Island, we have the pleasure of sharing the island with probably the world's most polite volcano. I mean, the lava comes out, and the lava comes out, and the lava comes out. There's never any sudden explosions. There's no eruption of gas. I mean, there are little things like the lava benches fall off into the ocean. But that's why it's a tourist attraction and a national park. But it is still a volcano, and if you come to Hawaii, it's worth the trip down there to see. Just please follow the rules that are up there. Those warning signs and ropes are not there as a decoration. And every year we do lose some very foolish people who will step over the barricades thinking that the ground on the other side looks just as solid as what they're standing on, and it's not. It's a thin layer of cooled glass over hot lava, and they'll pose for a selfie, and they don't even get the cell phone camera back here. Here in Hawaii also, they're dealing with something called the smartphone zombie, and this is a new law where you will be fined $99 for texting while crossing the street. And I actually think this is a good law because not too long ago, Claire and I had a very unfortunate incident. We were not on a city street. We were in the parking lot at the shopping center at the bottom of the hill, and we were getting ready to pull into a stall, and we had signaled, and this guy coming toward us, face buried in the cell phone, just walked right in front of my car as I was starting to pull on in. And we didn't hit him or anything. And as a matter of fact, I don't think he ever realized that we were there and almost ran into him because he just kept right on going. And it is amazing how buried people can get in those things. So I think this is actually a good idea. And folks, a little common sense. When you're driving, focus on the driving. When you're walking, focus on where you're going. So you don't crash into things or have things crash into you. It's rather alarming that they even had to pass this law in the first place. That people seem to think it's okay to walk along not paying attention to what's in front of you or around you. One of the reasons I don't wear the headphones for music players, I hate being cut off from the sounds around me. That conveys more information about what's going on. Seems to be this tendency to, and I understand reality is very ugly right now, but walling yourself off from it with goggles and headphones and the rest of it, that's not a solution. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. Now, over in Great Britain, their National Health Service is a shining example of everything that is wrong with government-managed health care. The National Health Service prevents parents from seeking experimental treatments for terminally ill children. The government can deem patients close to death and remove feeding tubes to starve them to death. This was once called the Liverpool Care Pathway. It's been renamed, but not changed. The National Health Service will even cut patients off from all government care if they catch them paying for their own care elsewhere or using natural healing methods. Recently, the National Health Service has decided that obese patients and smokers are not eligible for hip and knee replacement. And now the National Health Service is recommending doctors no longer prescribe herbal and homeopathic treatments to patients. If we're going to spend all this taxpayer money on health care, we're going to make sure it goes to those giant pharmaceutical corporations. Do you remember Flint, Michigan? Was the beacon, the warning, if you will, the canary in the coal mine for the deteriorating state of our water infrastructure. And researchers are starting to look into just how bad it was in Flint, Michigan, and they've started going into those water mains. And apparently they are so corroded, there are places where the lead has leached out completely, leaving holes. One of the researchers described it, it looked like the pipe was made out of Swiss cheese. And of course, this supports the accepted understanding that lead leached into the water system because the water wasn't treated to prevent corrosion. Because we got to save a few bucks here. This was all done by researchers at the University of Michigan, and it's the first to present direct evidence of this leaching mechanism. And now we're finding out there's a lot of places all across the United States where the water that comes out of your tap is very, very dangerous. And, of course, all these bottled water companies, Dasani and the rest of it, this is all good for their business. And there's another one of those I read over the weekend where they have been brought up by the FDA for deceptive labeling on their bottles of water. That in point of fact, despite all the pictures of pretty hills and blue skies and flowers and everything, it's just ordinary tap water. And yes, they'll filter it, but you can get a filter at your home. It's all marketing. Remember, the head of Nestle is on record as saying that water should not be a right, but should be owned by corporations and commoditized. Next, it'll be air. Didn't pay your air bill this month, we're here to garrote you. Story out of the Independent in Great Britain. Sperm counts in the West plunge by 60% in 40 years as modern life damages men's health. And they're saying this decline in sperm counts and ability to reproduce shows no sign of leveling off in recent years. Now, this same trend is not seen in other parts of the world, such as South America, Africa, and Asia. And the scientists are saying there's some aspect of modern life. Now, I wish they had included a chart of the decline to see how much of the decline took place ever since the first experimental plots of epicite corn were planted. Because if that gene breaks into the wild, and we know from past experience they do, anybody eating the corn contaminated with the epicite gene will be unable to reproduce because their body will produce antibodies to sperm and kill it off. Here in the United States, there's been a sudden decline in birth rates, and it has particularly affected the Hispanics, who are the highest per capita consumers of corn in the population. Now, Monsanto's official position is that the epicite gene is experimental, and they are not using it anywhere. But there is something going on, something about life in the West, something we're exposed to, is turning off those little critters. All right, let's talk about the world of computers here. Facebook is out there saying all your face are belong to us. And they're basically using facial recognition to track shoppers. Do you remember Minority Report, the shopping mall? Everywhere you went, you were greeted by name and a suggestion about something to buy based on what you bought before. And in the movie, it was all about eye scans. Well, they're not doing eye scans, but they are tracking your face. And it's the new coming thing. Going to see it on billboards in stores. You're going to walk by the billboard. It'll be tailored to your particular interests based on your Google searches, which is going to be a little rough for people such as myself who research a lot of stuff for articles, stuff that I'd never really be interested in. And you'd be surprised some of the bizarre email and website ads that pop up on my searches here. Facebook is apparently lobbying now to prevent state limits on facial recognition. They want to put it absolutely everywhere. Over in Great Britain, they're going to mandate facial recognition scanners, not just for airports, but now for train stations. So... Now, over at the DEF CON hacking convention in Las Vegas, the same one that ran that contest, how fast can you break into an electronic voting machine? And the worst time was 90 minutes. The best times were much, much shorter than that. So, yeah, they can be hacked. Despite what Obama said, yes, our elections are open to hacking here. There was another demonstration about a company that had developed Elon Musk's OpenAI framework to the task of creating malware that security engines can't spot. Basically, this AI takes legitimate-looking code and changes just a few tiny parts of it to convert it into an attack vector. And even changing small details can fool antivirus engines. And, of course, this AI can crank out the malware faster than the antivirus companies can add the definitions to the files. It's almost like they want to destroy the value of computing for ordinary consumers. They don't like us having computers. The big push now is everything goes back to the 1970s models of a mainframe, and all your electronic devices are just terminals into that mainframe. You have to work really hard to turn the cloud off in the iPhone, by the way. They don't like us having access to the internet. It was never supposed to be a public resource. Now, Russia has banned virtual private networks and all other technology that allows users to gain anonymous access to websites. And the new law signed by President Putin goes into effect on November 1st. And, of course, it's being screamed at. It's an attack on the open internet by the evil Russians. No, it's basically an attack on the out-of-control cybercrime problem. Because who is it who needs anonymous access to websites? People engaged in the buying and selling of things like child porn or drugs. If you're out there on the internet and you're going to write something down, if you truly stand behind your words, you put your name on it. But that's what Putin's doing over there. Now, as you know, on the 21st of August, there's going to be this amazing solar eclipse, and already the science channels are saying, don't have to leave the comfort of your living room. We will stream it live. And I can guarantee you, watching it on TV, we've all seen total solar eclipses on TV. It's not going to be the same thing. I was close enough once to a total eclipse where I sort of got the edge of the experience about just how dark it got and so forth and so on. So if you can get out there into the path of totality, it really is worth a trip. There's going to be traffic jams. Take lots of food and water because you may be sitting in traffic for a while. And obviously the idea is that you need to have some kind of safety glasses to view the sun before and after totality. During totality, you don't need any safety glasses, but you got to have before and after. Here's the problem. A lot of counterfeit glasses are flooding the Amazon website. And by counterfeit, what we mean are dark glasses that don't actually filter out all the bands of light that need to be filtered out. It's more than just the visible. It's also filtering out the ultraviolet. And apparently a lot of these very cheap solar filter glasses that are for sale on Amazon, they're just darkened glass. And the UV goes right on through, and it can seriously damage your eyes. So when you get your eye protection gear, you need to get it from a reputable source. And we posted up an article on reliable sources to get these filter glasses, because we're talking about your eyes. And if I were anywhere near there, I would be heading for the path of totality, because seeing a total eclipse is definitely on my bucket list. But it is amazing. Again, we get back to this idea of losing our moral compass. There are apparently people out there who, in the name of making a fast buck, are willing to allow their customers to suffer permanent eye damage by putting out an inferior product. Where did we get this idea of morality? That anything is permissible as long as it makes a fast profit. Where did we get this poisonous idea? Where did we get this sickness of greed? Where we've lost our ability to be concerned about the safety of our customers and our fellow man. Okay. Well, you probably thought that maybe the Oroville Dam was out of the news, but apparently not. The front surface of the Oroville Dam is starting to sprout what is called a green spot. And apparently a 15-member team at UC Berkeley is researching this. Now, the spot is located near the left abutment on the back side of the nation's tallest dam in Northern California. And this team from UC Berkeley published a 124-page report that says the green spot appears to represent a slow motion leakage failure of the dam. And, of course, the government is saying, no, the fact that this spot is greener than anywhere else on the dam is just due to rain and vegetation. It's a natural spring. We have no reason to worry about this at all. And, of course, author of the Berkeley report, Robert Bay, is saying if the spot was caused by rain, it shouldn't just be concentrated in one specific area. And he's absolutely right. If you go back and you study the failure of dams in history, you will find in many cases that it began literally months ahead of time with slow seepages and leaks that were slowly undermining or tunneling out the soil. And remember, Oroville is an earthen dam. It's not concrete. It's only concrete in areas like the spillway. But the dam itself is just a big pile of dirt, and if water is seeping through it, it's creating a hole in a tunnel. And as that hole and tunnel get bigger, the flow of water will increase. They're not out of the woods yet with that dam. And as usual, the government is saying, it's not a problem, trust us, we would never allow anything to harm you. So let's get on to human-caused global warming, and once again they're out there screaming about the dangers to the planet. Over at the Daily Mail, they're saying climate change will soon push Earth past its tipping point. Scientists are now 95% certain our planet will warm by at least 2 degrees centigrade this century. Now remember, it came out a couple of weeks ago that all the warming that's out there in the so-called official temperature records from NASA, NOAA, Hadley Climate Research Unit were added in by the scientists, supposedly as statistical data corrections. But the warming isn't there in the raw data. It simply wasn't. And they were out there pushing this nonsense again. Now, one of the indicators that the global warming people like to talk about is how many days the percentage of U.S. cities that are over 95 degrees or over 100 degrees through time. And the date they like to pick is July 30th. And the reality is that the percentage of U.S. cities that were over 95 degrees Fahrenheit or over 100 degrees Fahrenheit on July 30th has been in decline after 1960. Remember, in the 1970s, they were screaming about the coming ice age. Now, the global warming people like to encourage us to electric cars, and I have to admit, if I get the money to get a newer car, I'm probably going to go with something small and electric or hybrid. So far, though, electric vehicle penetration in this market has not been very good. It's 0.2% of America's vehicles are electric. And here's where it gets to be a problem. The electricity being used by these electric vehicles is still being produced by fossil fuels. So you're still getting the carbon, you're still getting the heat pollution. They've just moved it someplace different. So people driving electric cars are saying, I'm environmentally friendly and I'm driving a clean car. No, you're not. It's just the exhaust pipe belching all that carbon monoxide and everything else is located a distance away. And remember, because there is no 100% efficiency in the conversion and transport and storage of electricity in batteries, you're actually burning more fossil fuels to produce the electricity to run the electric car than you would need to burn just to drive the car. It sounds good in the media. It sounds good when these Hollywood celebrities talk about it, but it isn't really working just yet. Electric vehicles will be viable when we have thorium cycle reactors or fusion plants to produce electricity without the use of fossil fuels. Right now, it's an illusion. We're going to take a break for our last commercial break for the show. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. Now, Al Gore's film, An Inconvenient Sequel, is in theaters now after being given rave reviews all over the world by the Sundance Institute and all the rest of it. The corporate media, absolute must-see. And the total box office to date, according to Rotten Tomatoes, is $130,000. And I'm unable to actually find the cost to produce this, but they shot this all over the world. So the reality is people aren't going to see this because they know they got lied to before. But the corporate media is pushing this as hard as they can. And once again, they're coming up short. They're proving they no longer control what the American people think. Now, over in China, they're doing some really cool things over there. And I'm going to be very careful in the pronunciation of this. They have a brand new high-speed bullet train. It's called the Fuxing, F-U-X-I-N-G in English. The name literally means a renaissance. And it started running between Beijing and Shanghai. Apparently, people are just impressed with it. They're all over social media. And apparently, this train is capable of running at 400 kilometers per hour. Boy, that is really amazing to think about, that it can go that fast. We certainly don't have any bullet trains in this country. In fact, we have a lot of deteriorating rail designs. The U.S. government is making the same mistake that the Soviet Union made. They took too much of the nation's gross domestic product, they put it into the war machine. And there was so much waste and incompetence and just outright bad engineering. And they've neglected our country. Our rail system is no longer current with the rest of the world. Our roads are all cracked and decayed. Our water mains are literally full of holes where the lead has leached out. And you don't need me to tell you this. Just walk down the street of your local town and look at it as if you're a tourist from out of state. See all the cracks, all the corrosion, all the homeless, all the hungry. the Pentagon is right. The United States is an empire in decline. My concern is that the United States not get it into its head to blow up the rest of the world as it goes through its own death throes. Because I think that's what's going to happen. I'm seeing a Soviet Union-style collapse of the United States government. It's a very, very challenging times for all of us. And the only way we're going to get through it is we have to take care of each other. There's the music. Time for me to get out of here. I got to do the Jim Goddard Show up in Vancouver. Please stay tuned for John Stadmiller. He's got a lot of interesting things to share with you as well. Please take what you learn here on the radio show, on the website. Share it with everybody that you know. We'll be back tomorrow. Aloha, America.